We're here this morning to launch a new series of virtual roundtables centered on the future of workforce development that we're calling Meet the Changemakers. These roundtable events are going to convene workforce leaders from government, from industry, from academia, who are testing novel and really innovative solutions to the human capital challenges that are facing our country today. So I'm very pleased and excited to launch this roundtable series with Mission College in Santa Clara, California. And we're going to be discussing a really relevant topic today that I think will be familiar to everybody, which is the relationship between technology, STEM education and employment, opportunity, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is a really complex topic, and I'm so excited that we have representatives from so many sectors here today to discuss these issues and illuminate some of the complexities and perhaps the unexpected aspects of this topic. The changemakers who are participating in today's debut roundtable discussion include leaders from Mission College, NASA Ames, DuPont, and of course, the California State Legislature. For context, before we get started, I just wanted to cite the fact that there is a huge manufacturing skills gap in the United States today, and it's widening. It's predicted that it could leave as many as 2.1 million jobs unfulfilled by 2030. And at the same time, as everybody knows, increased diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workforce represents some really interesting opportunities for US manufacturing, technology development companies, and underrepresented communities to make really important progress on multiple fronts. So NextFlex, as a public-private consortium of US agencies, universities, and companies, which was created to strengthen advanced electronics and manufacturing capabilities in the United States, has a real stake in this discussion and in progress. So to help meet the demand for a highly trained workforce in advanced manufacturing, especially obviously in the revolutionary field of flexible hybrid electronics, which is what we focus on, NextFlex has developed a portfolio of innovative products that are designed to allow this sort of progress to take place. So at this time, I'd like to introduce a very special guest, California State Assembly member Alex Lee, to provide some introductory remarks. Assemblymember Lee represents California's 25th Assembly District, which includes Alameda, and Santa Clara counties, and parts of several cities such as San Jose, Cupertino, Sunnyvale, and Milpitas. His district also includes Mission College and the many of Silicon Valley's most prominent technology and manufacturing companies. In 2020, Assemblymember Lee became the youngest elected official in the state assembly on a platform advocating for education among several other important issues to the 25th Assembly District. We're honored to have Assemblymember Lee open today's Mission College Roundtable.
Well, thank you, Emily, for the introduction. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very proud to represent the 25th Assembly District right here in the South and East Bay, which is home to NextFlex and Mission College both. So I really appreciate this important conversation that we're having today, especially here in Silicon Valley. As the adoption of digitalization accelerates, the workforce of the future will be intertwined with technology more than ever. And with the pandemic, we're seeing even more rapid adoption of technology with remote work, collaboration, and of course, being right here on Zoom right now. As technology rapidly changes, this will be an ongoing process, and the future workforce will need continuous upskilling and reskilling along a technology-oriented trajectory. In order to attract skilled talent and to retain and grow the manufacturing industry, more needs to be done to build an inclusive work culture, increase equity and parity in underrepresented communities. Underrepresentation of minority students in the STEM workforce has been a longstanding issue, and our inability to achieve workforce diversity goals has been why we're unable to retain underrepresented minority students. While there has been some gains, national data continues to show that the disparity in STEM degree attainment for underrepresented students increases at each level of education attainment. For example, the math and science courses taken in high school have a direct correlation with STEM success for students who enroll in a 2-year or 4-year college. We have to work to break down barriers of entrance by investing in expanding K-12 STEM education, especially in lower income districts that may not have robust or advanced science class offerings. Biased assumptions about students can also lead to self-fulfilling prophecies in the classroom, and we need to do more to recruit and train teachers and to promote inclusive classrooms, which is the kind of work we're hoping to do in my role on the Education Committee and the Education Budget Committee. So there isn't one solution or a silver bullet, but a combination of different solutions that takes all of us and all our partners. And that's why programs like Next Flex Factor, now it's a lot of F sounds, are so important to foster the interest with hands-on experience and showing other students what's possible. So thank you again for having me. I'm really excited to hear from all the speakers on our panel today.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Lee. Those were, you touched on basically everything that I think our panelists are going to touch on today. So really appreciate those introductory remarks. At this time, what I'm going to do is introduce each of our guests with a question to help frame the issue that we're talking about. Their answers should illuminate their particular sector's role in talent creation or technology development, and then identify the importance of diversity for this sector and some of the opportunities and challenges they face. Once I've introduced each guest and given them the opportunity to answer the question, we're going to move into the roundtable discussion that will focus on the solutions to some of the challenges identified. So our first guest today, who I'd like to introduce, is Dean Jeff Palin from Mission College in Santa Clara, California. Dean Palin heads the Business Technology and Kinesiology Division and has extensive experience in both industry and academia. He brings a really unique perspective on the connection between opportunity, education, DEI, and economic development to the table. So I'm very excited to hear what he has to say. Dean Palin, your opening question is, would you be willing to provide some insight into the challenges our educational system faces in recruiting and supporting diverse students in STEM programs and the benefits of success in this area?
Thanks, Emily, and thank you, Assemblyman Lee. It's quite a question, and as we've heard, it's a very complex problem. For example, at Mission College, and I speak for all of the colleges, all of the community colleges in the state of California, if not nationally, we do not see a student population enrolled in our STEM programs at the community college specifically that is generally reflective of the diversity and inclusion that make up the population, for example, in Silicon Valley. And there's a need, obviously, for a more equitable representation of these members of our community. And the reasons are complex. For example, the pandemic has actually created more barriers rather than remove them, despite the adoption of technology. But underserved community members, the very people we're talking about right now, they're people of color, more often than not male, and challenged with family obligations, transportation needs, and or access to the very technology we're represent here in Silicon Valley so that they can attend classes. And these potential students also experience frustration, and this is key. It arises from a lack of awareness of the available support systems and a lack of awareness to how to get to those support systems, whether they're financial or social. We talk about first-gen students, first-generation students, students who are attending college and they're the first member of their family. There's nobody there to help them even with the application, let alone understand the value of that education. And they're also unfamiliar with how to access technology to support attendance, for example, remotely in the pandemic. And they have difficulty navigating the application and enrollment process. And let me tell you, with the community college system in California, that's nothing to be proud of. It is daunting even for somebody like me. And the college, on the other hand, provides tremendous resources and support. And this includes personal support, counseling, advising, financial support, such as stipends, equipment loans with hotspot access to online, and financial aid and other types of stipends for those who are housing insecure or food insecure. We have many resources that are available, but the barriers that are created by this lack of awareness and the lack of perceived benefit from the results that would occur by attending a STEM program, it really prevents a lot of the very students we're trying to serve from coming on board, enrolling, and attending class. And one final observation, we're a public institution of education. We are defined by open enrollment, and our public mandate of serving all members of the community is a wonderful opportunity, and yet an unintended consequence is that most in need are often most unaware and unable to take advantage of what we have to offer. So just real quickly, a solution, one of many, would be to touch on how we can create a more impactful outreach so that members of our community that are least aware of the benefits of education, K-12 through the 2-year, through the 4-year, are actually connected with those pathways to career opportunities, specifically in STEM. There are community-based organizations, foundations, along with city and county agencies and elected officials that should work together to connect these community members with who are not being served. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean Palin. You covered a lot of topics there that I think are going to be really of interest in the discussion later. I wanted to highlight two that you touched on that I thought were really interesting. One was the fact that a lot of young men are actually suffering more in terms of engagement and enrollment in STEM pathways, which is interesting. There's a lot of focus on young women when it comes to discussions about STEM-based careers, but we're definitely seeing more and more. I know a couple articles have come out lately. I think there was one in the Wall Street Journal not too long ago about the fact that young men are actually starting to get left behind in this field. And the second that I thought was really interesting that you touched on is that in some cases, the resources actually exist. And one of the biggest problems is motivating students and increasing awareness so that they're able to actually take advantage of those. And that is a really hard challenge. From our experience running the Flex Sector program, the thing that I've found that is actually the silver bullet is human connection, mentorship, support, and that doesn't scale very easily. So these are complex challenges, and I'm really excited to hear what our other panelists have to say about them. So I'd like to move on to our second guest now. I'd like to introduce Ms. Karen Bradford, who is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at NASA Ames Research Center in Mountain View, California. We were very fortunate to have Ms. Bradford as a keynote speaker at our Innovation Days in August this year. And her remarks were extremely well received by our government, industry, and education partners. So I'm very excited that Ms. Bradford was able to participate in the roundtable today and to provide some important insight on the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion to sparking innovation and progress. So Ms. Bradford, my question for you is, from your perspective as a director at NASA Ames, which is a government research center responsible for some of the most cutting edge progress on space exploration, would you tell us about the role that government plays in driving research and development in the STEM space, how a diverse workforce achieves success there, and some of the challenges that you face in this arena?
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Assemblyman Lee. I am very happy to be here. And what a daunting question, right, for a very daunting problem. In 3 minutes, okay, here we go. There's so much there. I'm going to piggyback on what Jeff just said as far as making sure people have access. NASA has been voted now, I don't know, 6 times in a row, the best place to work in the federal government, and yet we're still struggling with getting diverse and doing our diversity, equity, and inclusion, and making sure that our workforce is a reflection of the United States. And you may ask yourself, well, why is that? Right? There are several things. It is not an easy answer. One, access, right? Even knowing what's out there, or even knowing what we do at NASA, right? I often give talks lately to people. I say there's STEM and there's STEAM education, adding the arts to it. You can't be on the Enterprise and go on a 5-year mission with just a rocket scientist. Just doesn't work, right? You need a plethora of STEM focused fields as well as STEAM focused fields, and getting to our community colleges on up, frankly, getting from kindergarten on up, and letting people know they can see themselves on the meatball. Where do you fit in on the meatball? And having that conversation. And then for us understanding, just because I throw up a website doesn't mean everybody on the planet knows I've done it, right? So we tend to think that, oh, look, we have this information, we put up a website, people will know. There's no DNA in me that pings me when you put up a website about something that helps me. I haven't found it, and I work for NASA. Trust me, it's not there. And if it is there, I just don't know because somebody put it on a website. So we need to do a better job of really reaching to the communities we want to reach, right? If you're looking, I always say, don't go looking for catfish in a koi pond. If you're looking for that particularly area, that diverse area, go to the area, right? Don't just put it on a website. Reach out. That human connection is everything. And like you said, Emily, it doesn't scale up very well. And we all know that, and stop trying to do that, right? You do it to the best that you can, right? But I guess the other side of that, for the longest time, I've been doing this a long time. I've been with the government 34 years, and I've worked in diversity, equity, and inclusion areas for that, pretty much all of that. And for the longest time, people would say, well, don't worry that you didn't reach, X number of students. It's kind of like the starfish thing. If you help one, you've helped all. I think we kind of got stuck in that. And it really is, it's good, but it's antiquated in how we think. And we're not going to move the needle that way. We just aren't, right? So we need to find better ways of doing that. So sometimes, especially with my young students, I'm finding I'm doing more talks now with, let's say, the senior citizen groups in the area. Let's say the AARP, because you know what? My young people are talking to their parents, their grandparents, and trying to understand, why would I go to NASA? What is it in it for me, right? I'm also reaching out on all sorts of platforms, right? I'm no longer just putting it on USA Jobs, right? I'm doing Handshake, I'm doing Twitter, I'm doing Facebook. All the places that the children are, that's where I'm going. All the places that my postdocs are, that's where I'm going. But I'm also getting out of that traditional ways. I've got to get out of that traditional way of access and structure and thinking and look at non-traditional ways. Looking at professional societies. If you're looking for engineers and you think you want a Black engineer, great. Put it on your job site. Yes. Put it on Facebook. Yes. Go to the National Society of Black Engineers and talk to them. Don't, ta-da, right? Those kinds of things. So that's something we're struggling with at NASA. We're trying to find better ways of doing that. We're making sure in our proposals that go out, where we're reaching out to the community, we're reaching out to universities and asking for proposals, we're offering funding, and we're saying, and you need to work with an HBCU and MSI when you put in, you must do that, right? Now, are we scaling that to say, okay, you lose 10 points if you haven't made a phone call? No, we're not. We can't. But if you don't, we can certainly knock you down on points. We can certainly say, well, okay, maybe you're really great, but you're not exactly great because you didn't meet the criteria, which is that we expect you to reach out in a meaningful way, right? Reach out, connect, follow up. That's the thing. And then do it again. Reach out, connect, follow up. Go to where the people are. Go to where you have the conversations with the folk that you want to have in. And I want to give us a challenge. It's not just diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Feeling they really do have a place at your table, right? Because otherwise, it's just going in and out the door. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help them. You lose trust. Don't do that. But I'm giving the challenge to this panel as I'm giving it to my folk at NASA: diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Okay.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bradford. Again, I think there's going to be so much there for the panel to discuss, but I couldn't agree with you more that the importance of, if you want to diversify the STEM workforce, you have to go to where those communities are. And I think we definitely do not see enough of that active outreach that gets you to the population of individuals who you're trying to engage. You can't just, if you do what you've always done in terms of outreach, you're going to get what you've always got, and that's the existing STEM workforce. So could not agree with you more. Thank you so much. So I'm excited to introduce our next panelist. This is Dr. Sarah Mastrioni, who is an analytical lab manager and innovation portfolio champion at DuPont's Adhesive Group in Metro Detroit. Dr. Mastrioni is also a passionate STEM advocate and ambassador, leading and supporting numerous K-12 outreach programs through various organizations, including the Society of Women Engineers. She's also the co-chair of DuPont's GOLD program, Growth Opportunities Leading in Diversity, which is a recruiting program that seeks to support and expand the pipeline for doctoral scientists from underrepresented minority groups through mentoring and professional development, which is a great lead into everything that you've heard from our panelists so far. So Dr. Mastrioni, please tell us about the role industry plays in the development and commercialization of new technology and product solutions, the benefits of diverse teams in this space, and the challenges industry faces in attracting and retaining a diverse STEM workforce.
Awesome, and thank you for the introduction. So the first part of the question, industry is really where we get all of the things that we use every day. So from our cell phones, our cars, our medical supplies, that's all part of industry. Obviously, the original equipment manufacturers who are making those things. So this is Ford making the cars, Apple making electronic devices, but they're not the ones doing it all. Industry is really a complex network of suppliers and customers before it ever gets to the end user, that company right before them, and then everyone upstream. And innovation happens at all levels of this network. So for example, I work for DuPont, we're a material supplier. We're innovating materials with new properties so that, flexible electronic devices can have a long lifetime. They're not going to break by folding them. So that as we're developing electric vehicles with longer ranges, and we want to lightweight those cars to have better mileage, it still has the same safety. So strong, but lightweight, right? And these are all things that are going into these technologies all throughout the pipeline. That's just one piece of it. Upstream, downstream from where we are, including universities. That's where actually a lot of the fundamental research is happening now. But ultimately, industry is responsible for taking that technology and turning it into the products that we use. In terms of why diversity is important in that space, I actually have a quote from our Chief Technology and Sustainability Officer, Alexa Dembeck. So she said, innovation thrives in an environment rich from a foundation of diverse perspectives and nurtured through a culture of equity and inclusion. I think that's a really powerful statement. Diversity of thought is really critical for developing creative solutions. The more perspectives we have, the more ideas we have, the more innovation we have, and the more solutions we can come up with. So the other part of that is that the diverse teams that we're hopefully generating, feel that they can bring their voice and their perspectives to the table. So this is where that culture of inclusion is so important. If they're not bringing their whole voice there, they're not fully participating, we don't have that benefit of diversity. So in terms of challenges, I think number one, the obvious one is recruiting. This is the first place a lot of companies are looking to improve. And I'll really echo what Ms. Bradford said. Our workforce will only be as diverse as the candidate pool, which is only going to be as diverse as where we're going to look for them. So a lot of companies recruit at select universities for good reason, right? They might have really strong programs in a field that we're interested in. They might be close to a major manufacturing site or our headquarters. But if that's all we're doing, that we're completely reliant on those universities' ability to attract diverse talent, for our talent to look diverse. And this goes back, and this is at the PhD level, and then the undergraduate level, high school level, this goes all the way back. And then the other challenge I would say is definitely on that inclusion and belonging part of it. It's feeling you can bring your whole self to work. If the environment you're in doesn't support that, people will just leave, or in some cases, maybe worse, they'll stay and they're not going to be contributing fully. And that really takes away from the powerful impact that diversity could otherwise really have on innovation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mastriani. I loved the way that your remarks really dovetailed with what we've heard from Ms. Bradford and Dean Pallin. There's definitely some themes emerging here around, the importance of effective recruitment and that kind of outreach if you actually want to build a diverse workforce, and looking at how that starts, just like you said, K-12, education, and then all the way into the candidate pool. So thank you so much. Our last guest is NextLex's own portfolio manager for institutional programs, Ms. Courtney Power. Ms. Power is a veteran of the Air Force, a military spouse, and a passionate advocate for childhood education, especially for underserved and military-connected students. Ms. Power, my question for you is, would you tell us a little bit about the challenges our K-12 partners face in engaging all students, especially diverse and underrepresented students, with STEM pathways, and how you see access to quality STEM education and educational programming as a critical component of opportunity?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Emily. And it's hard to follow such esteemed panelists, and everyone's comments are just so spot on. And really, this past year and a half has shown us how much we rely as a society on our K-12 educational structure, and how challenging it is for our teachers to exist and thrive and to continue to serve our students as their whole selves. And I think that's really important, is that we acknowledge that STEM is not just technical capability, it's that ability to be a person and to present your whole self, as we've said before. But really, kind of the nuts and bolts of it in K-12 education, one of the biggest challenges is time. We have not figured out how to create time. And so there is a required instructional content, and except in very rare cases, teachers and courses must stick strictly to a syllabus or risk missing required content. And so what does this mean for things like STEM engagement, which is also often a bonus item? Well, it can mean less time for students to explore and create on their own, to really internalize those concepts that they're learning. It can mean less real life examples and more textbook teaching. And it can also mean that those opportunities for enrichment and outside learning are limited to those students with the access and the means, which inherently is how we self-select students out of our STEM engagement. As educators and professionals in the STEM sector, it's really our responsibility to encourage, engage, and advance the cause for all students to be exposed to STEM. And really this gets at, I see it as a two-pronged approach to this concept of opportunity. First is that in STEM, we solve problems, but we can only solve the problems that we care about and that we within the community care about. So for instance, I live in Wyoming. The problems of my community are very different than those of Detroit. But this is expected and understood. It's not good or bad, it just is. But as a global community, we limit our ability to have impact on the future and on our society as a whole if we're not open to diverse backgrounds. As was stated earlier, diversity of experience produces diversity of thought. It produces new problems, but new solutions and new ideas on how to go forward. And then second is our world is rapidly changing, and opportunity knocks on the doors of those who are prepared. We don't know what the future may hold, and we don't know what the STEM of the future may look like. But as wayfinders, as guides to students on this path, it's our job to help prepare them to seize these moments. STEM exposure can pay dividends for all students. I love the analogy of on the enterprise, just as much as the electrical engineer of the future is going to benefit from early exposure to STEM, the marketing professional of a next generation medical device is going to be better at his job if he understands some of the technology behind what he's trying to sell and advocate and show to the world. So our role is not to be gatekeepers. We are meant to be door openers. And really everyone deserves a chance to walk through that door and to find that path and to discover how STEM can be part of their own lives. And I think that's something that within the education sector, it's very easy to say STEM is science, technology, engineering, math, period, dot. And we have to open that aperture. It's STEAM, it's many aspects of our life, it's products we use every day, and innovation and creative thought exist in every juncture of the supply chain. And it's really important that we acknowledge that to our students so that they can see themselves in the future.
Thank you so much, Ms. Power. You hit on something that I think I didn't hear some of the other panelists say, so I want to touch on that quickly, which is the importance of technology in solving problems and therefore having diverse people in the sector. That reminded me of something that we've seen in Flex Sector, which is NextLex's Outreach and Engagement STEM-based program or STEAM-based program. And we run the program in Silicon Valley in partnership with Mission College and other local colleges. And Silicon Valley is an interesting area, right? You have some of the wealthiest people in the world and some of the people who really lack a lot of those resources. So the student population that we engage with is really varied. And in certain schools, we see students conceptualizing advanced products that are, expensive aftermarket add-ons to high-end vehicles that will say, let you know if you're about to get into a car accident or tell you if the driver is drunk or something like that. And those are really important problems to solve. But at the other end of the spectrum, our kids in other school districts whose parents are, say, migrant workers, are conceptualizing products for people who are working in fields to ensure that they're not dying of heat stroke and things like that. And those are equally important problems. And if those kids don't get into the STEM sector, we're not going to see those kind of solutions, because the kids who are conceptualizing the aftermarket add-ons to vehicles don't know those problems exist. They haven't experienced them. So we need that diversity in order to truly solve all the problems that are occurring in our world. So with that, we're actually ready to move into the roundtable discussion where you'll hear from everybody besides me again, which is great. We definitely heard some repeating themes come up through all of our panelists who spoke today. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say about the solutions to those problems. We're actually going to kick off the discussion with Assemblymember Lee. I have a very specific question for you, and then I will open it up to our panelists to respond after that. So Assemblymember Lee, can you share with us some ideas on how state and local governments can help to ensure that diverse and underrepresented students have access to high quality and transformative STEM education pathways?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really appreciate the conversation thus far. You know, I view it in my role, especially in the state assembly and as a member of the education committee and the budget committee, a lot of it is providing the resources to let our communities do what they do best, right? To teach students, outreach to students. So in California, we have a kind of a local control kind of methodology, where the state historically has not always been the case, but as the state provides the resources and we make sure, and then hopefully we work with our partners in the school districts to make sure that's realized. In this unprecedentedly large budget we had this year, and going back to your comment about, you know, the kind of land of paradoxes, perhaps, where we've, you know, even during the pandemic, where we had massive historic unemployment and people really suffering economically and in every other way, we also had historic gains in the stock market, historic gains in the economy, which is translated to our state budget ballooning to $262.2 billion. So pretty big mark. But in this year's budget, we were able to allocate $500 million for the Golden State Teacher Grant Program to subsidize credentialing for aspiring teachers who agree to teach in low-income areas with teacher shortage, and $5 million in educator training for computer science. Those are just some of the highlights I want to just point out, because when the state is able to allocate resources intentionally for the mission of reaching communities that need these resources, that's how we kind of do it. And that's the kind of stuff I think the state is really able to do. And then partnering with our school districts to make sure we have options. One thing I'm also very passionate about is just making sure that we don't create a one-size-fits-all, especially in our education system. Especially in the Silicon Valley, I think there's an overemphasis in that everyone must go to college and if you go to college, you have to go to Berkeley or Harvard, right? You have to go there, and that's the only option you have. But in reality, you know, there are so many different pathways of students to follow their interests and follow their passion, whether it be in the STEAM field or whether it be in any other field, really. And to emphasize that community colleges, the CSUs, and then our career tech opportunities are also there. In which case, you know, sometimes people come at different, come back into the tech industry and tech fields from different vantage points, right? I like the example of farm workers or other folks in different fields, because in this budget, we really fought really hard to make sure that our Silicon Valley Metro Ed career technical education school for high schoolers and of course adults remains open and is a priority. It's still something for mine to keep fixing, but to make sure we have that amount of exposure, right? If students are only stuck in a narrow lane and said, this is the definition of success and this is the only way you'll ever do it, without ever experiencing all your options, then there's no wonder that even when we get students of color into four-year institutions and colleges, that they're struggling, because it's not just that it's not because they don't have the capacity to do it, but maybe it's just not what they wanted. You know, it's not their passion. It's not what they actually signed up to do. Just someone funneled them towards that. So we have to make sure there's a lot of options for everyone and that they excel in it. And because I've actually also heard of a lot of folks who, through career tech and through all these alternate pathways, they went into work in one field, they discovered some things, and they're like, wow, this thing doesn't work really well. And so that's why I came back to school to try to fix something. And now they work in, you know, management jobs or work in high tech, where they used to work in different types of fields and jobs before. So making sure there's a variety of options for the diverse communities we have in California is going to be huge part of it. And then making sure the resources to provide those options and exposure to students.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Lee. That was a lot of information that was really interesting. A lot of it was really new to me. So thank you so much. And I want to turn it over to our other guests now to comment, elaborate, suggest some solutions to the problems that you brought up. It looks like Ms. Power has her mute button off. So I'm going to let you kick things off.
Yeah, I just love the Assembly member's point of really demonstrating the variety of pathways. I think one of the hallmarks and the things that I enjoy most about the Flex Factor program, and really that feeds me on a day-to-day basis, is that one of our hallmark touch points is that we do have an industry engagement. We ask acting and current industry members to come and visit with our students. And really it's not just sharing the details of what technology they're working with, but sharing the details of themselves and what their path was. And I think it's really important for students to hear these stories, because stories add humanity to the sciences. They give us a personal connection and they help students be able to see themselves and to have that demonstration of a lack of linearity. There is no linear path to success, and your success looks different than my success, and everyone's success has bumps on the road. And going through a process like Flex Factor, where you can kind of iterate on a problem and learn to fail and learn to fail forward. I love that concept of using failures as stepping stones and figuring out that, like, okay, maybe I thought I wanted to be in electrical engineering and it's not for me, but I found this really cool class in mechatronics and now I'm gonna go try that. And that's great, and that's sustaining, and it's durable, and it creates you know, just a breadth of experience and opportunity within the community.
I want to follow up with that, with what Courtney said and what Alex said. I love that. I don't think people listen. The number one question is, so what exactly did you do to get to NASA, to your position? What was your plan? I want to tell you I had a plan. There was no plan. I want to tell you that I had this wonderful step by step. There were more like craters. It wasn't just little, it wasn't crooked. It was craters and mountain slopes and all kinds of things. But I think, though, just as you said, it's not failure if you learn something from it. You just learned what to do or not to do. It's not a failure, right? You've gotten more data to make you understand what is the way to go. And I think in being both, teen mom, military wife, crazy government worker, all of the things that I've done, musician, have added into me being able to be where I am now, which is a wonderful place, right? Every time I say that 10 years ago, I say that now. It's a wonderful place because I know that I've done the best I can to get to where I can. The number one thing that helped were people who had enough confidence to say or provide me opportunities and see me in it sometimes when I couldn't see myself, right? I can't tell you how many times I've been in a meeting, whether it was with Navy or the Marine Corps or, with NASA or EPA, where I'm sitting in a meeting taking notes and they say, well, Karen's going to do that. And I write down the name Karen because I don't know who they're talking about. And then I realize it's me. And the fact that people have enough confidence, they want to offer the opportunity is crucial, right? I'm excited to hear this idea of, as Assemblyman Lee had mentioned and someone else mentioned, farm workers. I just came out of a meeting where I saw images of our astronauts on space station eating some of the first vegetables that were grown there, right? And I thought to myself, I'm going to do this next Flex Talk. I wonder how I can get the right people in the room. And this is what I do, right? As far as partnerships, I know I'm talking to Scott Farms up in Fresno because they're trying to figure out how to incorporate some of the agricultural technology transfer, by the way, which is free out there for people, into their system so they get a better product, they have better product in what they're doing. And working with Mercer College so that students have an opportunity using drone technology with agricultural technology, transfer technology, to help the farmers that are there both in Georgia as well as our farmers that are out here in California. And all of them are going to provide information that's going to help me to keep my astronauts from just eating potatoes, but getting to maybe having a lovely Caesar salad in the morning. Whatever it is that they're going to do, is I'm getting closer and closer to what I need to do to make sure that we're not only existing in space, but that we're thriving there. So all of that system and trying to get everyone together, one of the things I learned through this lovely crooked journey, and I was trying to figure out, what is my thing? My thing is managing chaos. My thing is throwing a diverse amount of people in a room when they don't even know they have something connection to get to an end product, right? I wouldn't have known that without those crooks and crannies. And I wouldn't have had those opportunities without people like you, saying it out loud, providing it. There's funding behind it. There's real stuff there and people taking the time to do it. So I encourage us all to do that as you go. Just keep talking about it. Just keep talking about it.
Dr. Mastriani, do you have any solutions to some of the challenges that you highlighted, ideas, responses to some of the other panelists?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, one, I just wanted to comment, a lot of times we think of research, I'm in a research environment, and R&D is a bunch of PhDs and lab coats. But we really have so many levels involved in that. We have folks who don't have degrees or who have bachelor's degrees all working together on these teams. And I think one of the coolest experiences for me is when I joined this one group in a previous role, I had no idea who was a PhD versus who was a tech, because there's a lot of internal training we do for folks to become experts on a piece of equipment or a technology. And it's, this guy over here, this lady over here, they're the go-to person for this. I don't know their background. I know what they're doing. I don't know what they did before they came here. I just know they're now my expert on this. And I think that's a really cool thing that maybe that perception doesn't come through when we think about industry and we think about, how do we get these jobs? I think we should caution, companies that, there might be a bit of a shift that we're requiring these degrees, but again, I think we've seen how successful people can be from just that on-the-job training. So I think continuing that's going to be really important. And then if we go back to the recruiting conversation, I do want to touch on that. Broadening our scope for that is going to be really important. There's no way any company or any organization can go to every school in the country. That would be the best way to get the good representative pool. It's impossible. So once again, the conferences, the professional organizations. We have a partnership with the National Organization for the Professional Advancement of Black Chemists and Chemical Engineers, NOBCHE, Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, National Society of Black Engineers, Society of Women Engineers. There's all these great organizations. They're not limiting what schools people are coming from. Anyone can join those organizations, and they do a great job at engaging those specific demographics. But there's also broader professional societies. So American Chemical Society, for example, at minimum, that can give you access to literally any school that has a chemistry, chemical engineering, material science department. And they themselves have their own diversity initiatives, right? We actually partnered with them this year. We have a 3-year agreement. We're supporting some of their programs on STEM education from high school through PhD level. And we actually just ran a workshop with them on industrial careers for PhDs. We had over 100 applicants for 30 spots in this workshop. We don't get 100 PhD applicants from any single university. So just the impact and maybe shifting how we're thinking about recruiting and where we recruit is going to be important. But I think there's another important aspect of recruiting, and that's how successful the candidates are once they get to the interview. We can broaden the pool, and I'll focus on PhD recruiting a bit, because that's what I'm most directly involved with at the moment. But part of that interview involves doing presentation on their research. So if we're going to the same schools, we go there every year, the professors and students kind of know what we're looking for, right? They can coach each other, they can prepare, they can present in a way that's going to be appealing to our companies who are going there every year. So when we start broadening the pool, that's great. But what if there's fantastic talent there who's doing great research, but maybe that doesn't come through on their resumes? Maybe they don't know anyone who's interviewed with this company. They don't have that coaching. They don't have that, support system to help build their presentation and present it well. I think there's a huge opportunity there. It's something we're developing, and a ton of other companies are developing. I know we just had a session with Merck and 3M, right? Competitors for us for talent. But we're all running programs where we have mentoring and coaching built in to this recruitment process. And that's really great because, of course, if we hire them, we're excited. If we don't hire them, right, we've done some training, we've done some coaching. That's going to benefit any of the students who are part of our programs, whether they join our companies or not. So that's really a big opportunity. And then I'd say the last thing is retention. So making sure, I think the first step of retention is making sure they get into the right place. I've heard some kind of horror stories where people said they were put into a group because they were looking for a diversity candidate, right? That is not a good environment to be in for that person, right? The other group mates might resent them. There might be this perception that they got in on something other than their qualifications. They might not got opportunities, good projects to work on. It's just not good for anyone. Obviously not good for the group either, because they're not getting good work out of them. So it's really important that the recruiting processes, I think, address this. And then also, if it is addressed, that the hiring managers understand what we're actually doing. So when we approach this, one of the things we do is the qualifications are the same. The forms we fill out for the candidates are the same. The whole interview process is the same. We're just engaging a step earlier to kind of get them prepared, help them understand, go through these workshops, have these mentoring sessions. How do you communicate your impact for an industrial audience so that when you're actually being evaluated, you're being evaluated on what you've actually done and just not how it's being presented. And then, of course, the last piece is retention. So getting them in the right place and retaining them. And that requires companies to listen to employee feedback. Seek employee feedback. You're not going to listen to it if you're not seeking it out. But then working on those cultural changes, which are really, really difficult. And it takes a commitment from leadership. And I will say, I've seen in a lot of other companies, as well as DuPont, grassroots efforts to kind of make these changes or add these programs or whatever it might be, improve benefits and maternity leave and things like that to support, the communities who work at our companies. The grassroots efforts are successful, but they really thrive when leadership, comes in and supports them. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things we need to think about from all levels, right? Through the education, but then also once we have people in their roles that, we're making a good work environment for them as well.
Thank you so much for those comments. I think you hit on something that at least I became much more aware of over, say, the last year of my life, as a lot of these conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion came to the national forefront, and that is the question of culture and what an advantage it is to be brought up in certain cultures. And something that occurred to me maybe a year ago as I first started sort of becoming aware of all these factors, which I truly had been completely oblivious to before, was the fact that professional culture, what I think of as professional and what I would have, told you defined professional culture a year ago, overlaps almost entirely with upper middle class white culture. And so if you grew up in a family that spoke a certain way, that communicated a certain way, that dressed a certain way, interacted with other people a certain way, you're sort of automatically professional. And if you didn't grow up in a family like that, you are not acting professionally. And I had to stop and examine my beliefs about what is actually professional, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, things like that. What actually helps, move a project forward versus what is totally irrelevant and just something that I, grew up thinking about like that. So I think that's, your points there were really, really important, and something that, as a country and then as, companies and as organizations within companies, we need to take really seriously a look at a very, very in depth, and then really examine what we're doing to help. And Assemblymember Lee, I see that you have to sign off now. Thank you so much for your attendance here. This is absolutely fantastic. And we're about to close things out anyway, but really appreciate it. Do you have any last words that you want to share with anyone before you go? No pressure.
No, I just wanted to thank everyone for the wonderful, wonderful work you all do in fostering the future generations of innovators and thinkers. And I really look forward to working with all of you in the future too. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So Dean Palin, I'd like to ask you to close us out today with a closing question, which is, are you optimistic about government, industry, and academia working together collaboratively to train tomorrow's workforce? And if so, what are Mission College's plans to meet that challenge?
Yeah, thanks. And yes, I am very optimistic. It sure beats the alternative. What's the old expression? Don't be a pessimist. It doesn't work anyway, right? But seriously, yes, I am optimistic. And let me tell you why. We have great minds, great ideas being shared today. It's quite wonderful. We're talking in very general terms, which is important. But when we really go down to the level of making a difference, we're talking about going down to a very specific level. And that's where here at Mission College, we're actually beginning to see positive change. And I'm going to cite two examples. One is the work that we've done with NextFlex, the Flex Factor program with K-12, where we are building the awareness that I talked about earlier that was lacking with K-12 students who are now a little bit more aware of all of the things that our panelists talked about. Karen, Courtney, and Sarah talked about in terms of what's the life like and what's the story that you tell and how did you get there? And the Flex Factor program really helps. Another example I want to give, they're not here at the table, but Mission College is very happy to be working with an organization named Year Up. which is a national organization. And one of the things that Year Up does is they go out into the community. They go where those people are. And when I say those people, please don't misunderstand, but they go where people are who are being left out, who are underserved in one way or another. And we don't want to define them by negative attributes. We want to define them by the opportunity, because we have recognized today the need for diversity and inclusion. We've recognized today that having diverse perspectives helps in the creative and innovative efforts in a company as fundamental as DuPont. We have heard that bringing together these diverse groups is important, and that's what Year Up has done. I'm proud to say that 81 students were enrolled in our spring cohort. We've got 80 students in our fall cohort. 67 of the 80 students in the spring cohort went on to actually go into paid internships this fall with a variety of companies around the country, actually. And we're now planning the spring schedule. When I'm through with this meeting, I'm actually going to another meeting with Year Up to keep working on tinkering the spring schedule so that we get all the pieces together. But my point is that they are going to where the people are that we want to attract into the various educational opportunities, so that then they are prepared, they have the toolkit, they have the wherewithal to actually pursue those careers that we've heard are so important at NASA Ames, at DuPont, and Lord knows every other company, certainly here in Silicon Valley, if not in the US. So again, let's not try and boil the ocean. Let's drill down to the very specific point at which we can make a difference. That's why I'm optimistic.
Thank you so much, Dean Pallin. And thank you so much to all of our panelists who are here today. I think that you guys all did a fantastic job of illuminating how complex this space is, how diverse the challenges are, and how many different solutions there are there. Like Ms. Power said, it's not, one linear path for every single student. We need to make sure that we are creating a playing field that allows every student to follow their own little unique path. So there's a lot of work ahead of us, a ton of work. And in a lot of ways, it's the least scalable type of work. It is the type that involves human connection and reaching out, providing those additional opportunities, expanding the way that everybody who's already in industry and government and academia is thinking about these things. But I'm so excited about the progress that I think we're making as a nation. I'm very excited about the people who are working in this space, and I'm very grateful to be working with all of you. So thank you so much for joining us here today, for sharing your thoughts. And I look forward to seeing you again in the near future.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.